Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video. International break is finally over. The last one before March, and we're about to get some madness in terms of volume of FPL fixtures. It's my favourite time of the year, definitely. Probably Josh's favourite too. Let's get into Josh's team for game week 12. And I've heard there's quite a few changes.
Okay then, so getting into my team straight away, don't look at the rank. It's probably the worst rank that I've ever had at this stage of a season, ever. Come off the back of two of the best seasons that I've had ever. It's an interesting start to the season, that's for sure. But what I would say, if you're ranked anywhere in the top 6 million, 7 million, there's a lot of game weeks to go, and 9 of them are about to come in the next 42 days. So it's coming in thick and fast, as Ben mentioned, and hopefully we're going to climb up with some big green arrows in that time. So we're going to start off in the defence. Obviously, David Raya's in goal. He is back down to 5.5 million. A lot of managers are selling him, and I think that's just due to not really seeing the points in the last 6 weeks. In the first 6, we were sort of spoiled, or in the first 5, 6, we were spoiled with loads of points, bonus points, save points. David Raya was the best. Last 6, not the same. We've not been getting as many clean sheets at all. No save points. It's sort of the absolute opposite. So hopefully he picks up a little bit. I think the clean sheets should start returning with Arsenal. I'm not expecting the bonus points as what we had before. I think that was a bit of a almost like a fluke where Arsenal were conceding a lot of chances, but he was still managing to obviously keep them in games, make important saves, and therefore keeping the clean sheet. So an interesting pick. If I was wildcarding right now, I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't have him, but he's in there and he covers that Arsenal defence, who are also got the highest odds of a clean sheet this week according to the bookies. In the defence at the moment, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is Rico Lewis at home to Spurs. I don't think they're going to keep a clean sheet, and also don't think that Rico Lewis offers too much attacking threat. So it's an interesting reason why I'm going to go with him, but it's basically because I've got Mykolenko as the alternative, and Brian Mbeumo is in my midfield. So I don't really want that fixture clash in my team. So I'm sort of going to back that City clean sheet, even though I think it's a really slim chance of them getting one at the Etihad. Aït-Nouri is up next, Fulham away. Good attacking threat, a relatively decent chance of a clean sheet for an away game. I don't think it's anything too hard going to Craven Cottage. They don't score a plethora of goals. They have looked good going forwards, don't get me wrong, but I think Wolves equally could keep a clean sheet there. So we'll wait and see on that. I think Aït-Nouri as well gives you that attacking threat that not a lot of other £4.5 million defenders do offer. And then we've got Diogo Dalot as the third and final defender. Obviously, I'd actually argue maybe a potential rotation risk with him at the moment. Obviously, Luke Shaw's back in training, Lenny Yoro's back in training, Tyrell Malassia's back in training, so they've got options at left wing back, which could maybe see Mazraoui start at right wing back, presuming that United play the 3-back that is obviously rumoured to be coming in under Ruben Amorim. So a lot of question marks around United players. If you're looking to bring in United players this week, I'd probably avoid it and just unless it's Bruno Fernandes, because he's the only obvious one that will start. So yeah, what's your thoughts on that, Ben? I'd equally like to know what you would do in the situation with that Mykolenko-Lewis dilemma.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I'd actually sort of back Manchester City to keep a clean sheet more than I would Everton to keep a clean sheet in this situation. I do believe Rico Lewis will start as well, so in my opinion, I think it's the right decision to make. It's a difficult one, but again, you're covering a City defence that's a lot higher owned than the Everton one. So in terms of EO, you're covering yourself there, which I think is sensible. Aït-Nouri and Dalot, both away fixtures. Aït-Nouri, I think, sort of probably one of the better picks that you've got in there. Let's hope he doesn't get injured like he did at Fulham away last year. So we'll hope that we haven't jinxed him there. And yeah, completely agree with you, Dalot. Like a rotation risk, but a difficult one to transfer out as well, because I'm sure sort of further up in the team there's a few changes that you're going to have to be enforced to make. So it's one on the back burner for now. If it comes out that Dalot's starting, then you're probably looking in a really good position with him. So yeah, it's not a sell, it's not a buy, it's not a do anything with. So yeah, I expect a couple of clean sheets in that defence this week, but I don't expect all the points in the world for you.
Okay then, so we're going to move on into the midfield as it stands. I will show my potential transfer plans after I go through the full team, so bear with me on that. At the moment, Cole Palmer does have the armband with that Leicester away fixture. just to warn you, it's the early kickoff, so just bear that in mind if you're going to choose the armband on Cole Palmer, if you're that way inclined to superstitions. But yeah, really nice fixture. Away from home, obviously maybe not as ideal as him being at home. I think Cole Palmer at Stamford Bridge has a really good record. Obviously, he got those goals against Brighton there as well. So I don't. If you're going to captain him, I don't really mind it. It's definitely between him and Salah for me, and they're obviously both away fixtures, so an interesting one indeed. And Mbeumo, as I mentioned, is in the midfield. Everton away. The big problem I have with Mbeumo at the moment is that when Mikkel Damsgaard's playing, he's playing closer to Visser, like we've seen Mbeumo do in recent weeks. So it sort of takes him away as that sort of attacking asset that we've seen. He's playing a lot more further wide and right, especially in the last couple of fixtures. So if Damsgaard starts, it's usually bad news for Mbeumo owners. So I'm just going to bear that in mind. If I was on wildcard, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have him just because I think Damsgaard does keep his place. He's been playing pretty well, Damsgaard, as well. So, yeah, a bit of an annoying one for Mbeumo owners because he still has the set pieces, the penalties, things like that, but he's just not getting that open play threat that we've usually seen with him and made him so sort of reliable. Semenyo is also up next. Again, someone who's got quite decent fixtures for the long term. Quite important to this Bournemouth side. It would be nice if he just had penalties or something like that to go along with it, but he doesn't at the moment. Brighton at home this week is a decent fixture. I think if you have Semenyo, he's definitely a hold at the moment. And then Phil Foden is last in midfield. He will definitely be sold this week. I brought him in sort of ahead of the curve, but there was no curve. It was just pure straight down. And yeah, he's not been a great pick. Obviously picking up that one assist since I brought him in, I think 4 or 5 weeks ago, off the bench against Wolves. I must say, I feel like I've been quite unlucky with him because he's set up numerous big chances for Erling Haaland, who's not put them away. But it's just what happens. Sometimes they return, sometimes they don't. This time it hasn't, so he'll be getting shipped off this week. What's your thoughts on the midfield, Ben?
Yeah, don't blame me for wanting to ship out Phil Foden and sort of making that decision on that. Yeah, he's fairly low owned now as well. Like, managers have sort of, yeah, difficult one to take, but it's got to be done at that price point. You just can't afford to be having that many blanks in a row. I agree with you with Mbeumo. Like, it's a difficult situation for owners, and if you could, you probably would sell. But again, there's a bit more pressing issues with the team in terms of the transfer that you want to make to sort of increase upside. There is sort of still that potential of a haul, but it's much lower now that the position has slightly changed for him. Yeah, but all in all, it's a fairly strong midfield for this game week, and yeah, interested to sort of see how that changes with your potential transfer plan.
Okay then, so moving on into the front three, and first off we have Ollie Watkins. He's on a bit of a run of blanks at the moment, but Crystal Palace at home is probably not a fixture that I'm going to sell him for. Palace haven't looked too good this season, and Watkins himself has had quite a lot of chances in those games, just again, similar to Erling Haaland, just not really finishing his dinner. What I am worried about longer term with Watkins is the potential for rotation. We're seeing it in bits and pieces with him coming off earlier and earlier. I think there will be a game in this sort of deep run of these 9 fixtures in, 42 days, that we will see maybe John Duran start and Watkins take the seat on the bench for one of those games. So yeah, something to bear in mind if you are owning him or wanting to own in him. I just don't think he's maybe as nailed as what he was maybe last season. Raul Jimenez I'm going to talk about next. Wolves at home this week. I don't mind that at all. Obviously, I know I said that Nuri has a good chance of clean sheet. Sadly, I can't get away from this fixture clash in my team. I think, yeah, Raul Jimenez potentially on penalties as well. I'd be silly not to start him this week against his former side. There could be a bit of narrative building going around there. And then Erling Haaland as well. Probably will be the last week that he's in my team. I'm going to probably sell him this week just to fund the moves elsewhere. I do not think that Erling Haaland is a bad player to have this week. I think it's actually a decent pick going against this Tottenham at home side who could be without Van der Ven and Romero. But it's just he's not living up to that £15 million price tag, and in my situation without Mo Salah, I need to find a way to get Mo Salah in, and that is the most obvious route. And I do feel in the next 7 game weeks I could spread the funds and sort of almost cover those points and get more points elsewhere than having 15 million lumped up top. So yeah, what's your thoughts on those 2 other guys, then Haaland, and then we'll get into those transfers afterwards, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, in your situation, it's difficult because you've sort of spread the funds out a little bit, which means you can't sort of really have them all, which is unfortunate. And obviously Salah has been so fantastic that you've got to really sort of get get him in. If you had already owned Salah instead of Palmer, maybe it's a different story that we're talking about in terms of your strategy there. But yeah, I think in your situation, it's a difficult one not to do and not to make the moves, which is interesting. I agree with you for Watkins. It's probably last couple of weeks for him to sort of really make an impression before shipping him out. And yeah, with your situation with Raul Jimenez, I'd almost be tempted to avoid the fixture clash. I know it's the narrative and that sort of thing, but with Villa's good fixture at home, I could really be tempted by the options that you've got on the bench there as well. So yeah, it's a difficult one and a benching headache and dilemma, but that's a good thing because it means your team is in, not the worst shape there.
So then, looking ahead into the transfers and the two projected or predicted transfers, I guess you could say, is going to be Haaland and Foden out, Salah and Isak in. Obviously, Salah I haven't owned all season long, and that's probably why I'm ranked at 3.3 million with him returning basically every single game week. Isak for me is not a bad pick. He's got West Ham this week, which I think is a good game at the moment. See, Lopetegui's still in charge. I think his job is basically on the line at the moment, and Isak's expected goal involvement in those fixtures of the last 3 or 4 has been really, really solid. Obviously, Mo Salah sort of just picks himself at the moment, and I'm almost certain that I'd probably have the armband on him rather than Palmer, just because of that consistency with his returns at the moment. Southampton away, I think Southampton have conceded an average of 7 points per game to right wingers so far this season. I saw floating about on Twitter this week. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me personally. Obviously, this does leave quite a bit of funds in the bank as well. So I have about £3.4 million in the bank. So it really easily funds a move from Brian Mbeumo up to Bukayo Saka if I really want to, maybe in the coming weeks as well. So in terms of spreading those funds from Haaland, like I mentioned before, I think this way sort of benefits me more. And another reason why I think it's also good is because I don't see myself captaining Erling Haaland in probably the next 6 game weeks. I think there's better options elsewhere. Cole Palmer and Salah being the majority of them. I think Palmer, I can captain him in 6 of the next 7 game weeks, which is absolutely ideal. And for someone who maybe doesn't have Haaland, it's really important to have that strategy nailed down of having a captain in place, because let's be honest, we reliably captain Haaland most game weeks with his fixture proofness. So yeah, they're the proposed moves. What's your thoughts on those, Ben?
Yeah, it seems like sort of the sensible and obvious moves, to be honest. Like there is an element of risk attached, because there's always going to be an element of risk attached. But in terms of sort of the risk taking of that, it's not the sort of riskiest moves in the world, and it's a move that is a template move as well, which is interesting. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think Salah is probably the best captaincy choice to go with this week. I think, to be honest, it's a close call between him, Palmer, and Haaland, if I'm being completely honest, in terms of the statistics mainly of the opposition team that they're playing. But you have to take into account form, and Salah's form is so much superior at the moment to Manchester City in general. I don't think you could highlight too much on Haaland's form, because he scored so many goals sort of over the international break as well. So yeah, it's a risk, but I think it's the sensible move to make. Okay, so moving on into my team, and as you can see, I'm at 89k in the world. So I've had a really good start to the season. Not planning on hitting my wild card this week, which I acknowledge is a bit of a risk not to do, but I feel like my team's in a fairly good position, and there's not too many sort of problem areas. There's a few flags in my team, but it's classic international break flags that I think will come off come Thursday and Friday. In goal, we've got David Raya. Nottingham Forest at home is a decent fixture. Covers the Arsenal defence, just like Josh. Fairly happy to keep him for now. In a defence, we've got Trent at the moment, and it's a wait and see with him. I think it's likely that I'm going to transfer him out. I've got 2 free transfers to make. And potentially I'll need to fund up into the midfield. So Trent is the obvious pick to downgrade. If I'm sort of looking at where, I'll sort of speak on sort of in a minute what the potential moves could be when we get into the midfield. But Trent could be out just because I think with the injury, I think his minutes are going to be managed coming back into this. Southampton away is not the most difficult fixture in the world. No disrespect to Southampton, but if there's any game that you could rest him for, it would be that one, especially with a capable deputy like Connor Bradley. Continuing on in defence, we've got Ezri Konsa. Palace at home is a decent fixture. Again, one that we've got to monitor for injury, because he came off in that England game after 45. I don't think it looked too bad, to be honest with you, and I think it's just a precautionary measure that Aston Villa took. I think it's a decision Aston Villa took rather than England in that one. So hopefully he'll be back. He'll either play the full 90 or he won't feature at all. Gvardiol, just like Josh, it's a difficult one. If I'm going to back a team to keep a clean sheet, City, you can never be sure, but Gvardiol does have the attacking threat, and I think having that £6 million defender is going to be really important for me to sort of flick between him, Trent, not Trent, Van Dijk, etc., Gabriel, and at the moment Gvardiol's done really well for me, albeit some of it has been a little bit lucky, to say the least, but it's looking in a decent position there. Josh, what's the thoughts on the defence there?
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts about selling Trent. I think I just don't see him being risked this week with Real Madrid in the Champions League midweek. I think they'll probably try and save him for that. He might get some minutes against Southampton, but to be honest, it's a hamstring injury. They're not going to rush him back because it'll just become worse. Ezri Konsa, I feel like he gets injured every international break, it seems. But yeah, I think he's a solid pick if someone's wildcarding as well. 4.4 million. Villa have got much better fixtures. I do categorically think that Villa defensively is a bit of a trap, but they do have some good fixture. I think they will pick up a couple of clean sheets. And Gvardiol, there's just no reason not to play him. Even when they don't get clean sheets, he'll just smack one in the top bins anyway, so you'll be all good with that.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and as you can see, we've got Salah captained. I'll be honest, I'm really tempted to captain Haaland, but I don't think I've got the balls to take on Salah's expected ownership. I'll be really honest. Like Josh said, like in his team, like the stats for Salah and the stats for Southampton's team on that side of the pitch are too good to ignore. Like, despite how sort of fragile Spurs are down the centre of the pitch, like they've conceded the most chance out of any team. I think I'll be happy just to own him this week and captain Salah there. So I think that's what's going to happen there. Like, yeah, if I was in a position like Josh's, I probably would captain Haaland. I probably would if I was in Josh's position in terms of rank, but I've sort of wanted to protect it at the moment a little bit, and let's see what happens there. I might change my mind, but not sure about that. Mbeumo is in there at the moment. It's a really interesting one. We'll talk about the transfer plans now. Trent out, Mbeumo potentially out, allows me to go straight to Cole Palmer and to a 4.1 million defender, so I could get someone like Van den Berg, or sort of a £4 million defender there. Allows me, I think it will allow me to sort of bring in Ait-Nouri off the bench as well, which is ideal because I think the fixture's not too bad for him as well. So that's the potential transfer plan. It's a risk because Mbeumo could return, but like Josh said, the threat from open play is just not as much as it was. So if I'm going to get off of him, now's probably a good time. Like, the fixtures are not too bad over the next couple, but then they get a little bit more difficult. And then the three players in here that have done really well for me over the last few weeks and always seem to keep ticking over: Semenyo, Rodgers and Smith-Rowe, all at the same price point. I acknowledge that it's a big risk to have three players at that price point, but they're all performing at the moment to a decent standard. They're all ticking over. At least one of them is getting a return every week, which is really helping. So happy to keep all three of them with a fairly decent home fixture as well. Obviously, it just means that there's a little bit of clash between Ait-Nouri and Smith-Rowe, but you know what? I wouldn't mind that at all, just based on how attacking Ait-Nouri is. Josh, what's the thoughts on the midfield there, and then the potential transfer plan? Am I loading up too much on three individual assets in the premiums?
I think it's a risk, but it might be a risk worth taking. Obviously, I think the only caveat that I'd say in terms of a negative is that you're going into a busy schedule now with 9 games in 42 days, and you're potentially going to be using the likes of Harwood Bellis, Van den Berg, or whoever you bring in that defence as a potentially rotational piece, which obviously Harwood Bellis for me obviously is not a fantastic pick, despite he has decent goal threat, to be fair. But yeah, it's just having that sort of extra 0.5 it would need just to get that 4.5, not even that, maybe 0.2 to like a Joachim Andersen of Fulham or something like that. I think I'd just be a lot more secure knowing that I've got a 4.5 million pound defender, basically, would be the only caveat there. And like you've already alluded to, obviously those three midfielders are really good, decent price point. I think they're all equally underpriced as well, but can you rely on 3 5.5s week after week when people are going to have the likes of Bruno even in Buemo in the next couple if you're going to take him out. It'll be an interesting one. I mean, you've survived this season and done really, really well on it, so it might be the way to go. But I think, yeah, equally, Cole Palmer is as close to essential as possible going into this fixture run. Some really nice games for Chelsea coming up. Mentioned it in my team, that the captaincy ratio of him at the moment. So yeah, for me, he's definitely one that you need to get, but it's the sacrifice where you can't have everyone, and that's equally the same with me with no Haaland.
Okay, so moving on into my strike force, and of course we've got Erling Haaland in there. I've kept him. I've mentioned why I've kept him sort of previously, based on that Tottenham defence, and they're missing defenders as well. So hopefully they can get sort of going and get some goals against Spurs at home, which is not a bad fixture at all. And then Cunha up front as well, who's been fantastic for me since I brought him in. He's scored a couple of goals, he's got a couple of assists. I can't complain too much. So yeah, that's the team. The bench, of course, is at the moment Ait, Nouri, Vardy, Harwood, Bellis. As Josh said, I agree, it is a bit of a risk to do the moves that I'm planning on taking because of squad structure and squad depth. But the caveat is I've still got that wild card in hand, which is fantastic. So I could get over the next couple of weeks before the fixtures start getting really congested, and I could just take advantage of it over the next couple of weeks, which, it's the current thought process around not taking that wild card. Fairly happy with it at the moment. Of course, I've left myself a bit of a risk in terms of like injury news over Thursday and Friday. If we get some, if say, for example, we have Trent confirmed out, Konza confirmed out, and one other that's unexpected, like a Semenyo, then I leave myself in a position where I'm wildcarding and not gaining too much value from that. It's a risk, but at the moment, I'm fairly happy with my team. I've got to just sort of ride it out and see what happens over the next couple of weeks, because the structure is there and it looks good. And having all three of them over the next at least couple of weeks until we work out, from this international break, who's sort of continued that form, could be really beneficial. So yeah, that's the overall team. Josh, any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I like it. I like the idea that you've got that luxury of being able to just hit the panic card straight away, and get out of the situation if it does turn to pot. Equally, Erling Haaland, if he doesn't return against Spurs, everyone's going to look back and be like, why did we not sell him versus Spurs? And he's got Liverpool next week. It's just one of those where hindsight will play a massive factor into it. But equally, you can get yourself out of that situation really simply, and you wouldn't even need to use your wild card if you wanted to sell Haaland, because it would just free up the funds. So yeah, nice position to be in. I think you'll definitely obviously see some green arrows having the likes of Palmer, Salah and Haaland in your team. It's just how long that sort of period can sustain before you hit that wild card. Okay then, so some big team reveals there for game week 12. A lot of decisions to be made. It's been a long international break waiting for the deadline to come around, but we are finally nearly there. Really looking forward to this week. I think it's going to be a big week for both of us, so yeah, stay tuned to the rest of our socials to see the final locked in moves.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely huge. There could be some massive swings there. Make sure to keep tabs on all of our socials for how we're getting on over this game week. As always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never make me wanna stick around you.